and K through 12 on technology so they could just secure a revenue stream to the future. That's where I was. And then I found Allison's work, and it made sense. And you will see how it makes sense. And so I'll turn it over to her. She's from Philadelphia. She's kind of here on her own dime. She doesn't get any money for doing this. It's just goodwill and trying to combat
We're all
the
have to
robots.
live in this world together. And I'm really fortunate because I'm from Philadelphia. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna like voice record this so I can include it with the slides later because I've done this for another talk. So my background was art history and then historic preservation. So I really and I never liked economics or computers or finance or any of the things that I had to learn to figure this out. But when I was in my graduate program, what I was focusing on was cultural landscapes, actually. And in a very interesting way, you have these moments at some, certain points. And I remember speaking with my thesis advisor, and she's like, "You're going to understand the land. You're going to understand the landscape, and your family will benefit from this." And it was a very weird conversation. I can't remember why it even came up. But it was like, "You'll know the land, and your family, it's important." And I was like, "Okay, Dr. Wells, And it turns out, I think this is the landscape that I was supposed to explore. And it was not a literal landscape, although it does have geography to it, and you'll see how I build these relationship maps, and it's really interesting to actually see things in the virtual world and find them, and then go find them in the real world and see what their reality is and how they intersect. So that's a little bit about me. I came into this through public education activism. So I was a parent. My child just finished their whole 13 years in the Philadelphia Public Schools, which is a crucible of ed reform, has been for years disruption, as many urban districts have been for privatization. And in 2015, our district closed 23 schools and laid off 3,000 teachers. And then a lot of the teachers came back, but the schools were closed, and I was so angry. And at the same time, they instituted a school report card system that was going to not affect charter schools, but was going to affect the public schools that had been totally disrupted. And I was like, and then they were going to have a meeting at the end of August when everyone's on vacation. And it turns out the Dell Foundation had funded this school report card. So we lined up 50 people, and we all showed up, and we said, "This isn't fair, and this is wrong. We don't want our schools scored in this disastrous situation." And it was supposed to be the first of 6 meetings, and they canceled the other 5. And I'm like, okay. And they were going to have a chosen focus group instead of a public meeting. I'm like, no, this is not right. So at that time, I thought what they're using to close our schools were the test scores. And so I got really involved with the opt-out movement and refusing to participate in the standardized testing scores and trying to educate parents in the Philadelphia system. They're weaponizing these scores to close our schools. You don't have to participate. Pennsylvania is actually one of the states that has a religious opt-out. I think maybe due to the Amish. You don't have to cite what your religion is, but you do have a legal opt-out. And so we were like, let's just withhold the data. We should not participate in this. And so I did that for several years until eventually our school district, which we've had 8 road superintendents, I would go and I would say, and you need to provide the photocopies because those schools don't, because there was a piece of the book that said you could opt out. You need to provide the copies to the parents, and you need to translate it, and you need to give them to the schools because the principals don't have the paper. And they're like, okay. I was like, okay, what's the trick? Right? Because they wouldn't have ever done that. Even if they were supposed to, they would always have some reason. I'm like, what is in it? And it took me, this was in the summer leading up to ESSA passing, Every Student Succeeds Act. And I was like, what is going on here? Why are they agreeing to this? And then what I realized is that within ESSA and this new mode of what I'm going to talk about, pay for success and growth, is for these financial markets to operate. A 1-year time of year test doesn't work for a data-driven economy. They need benchmark tests. The benchmark tests, which had been simmering in the background, needed to come to center stage. And so really, in some ways, sadly, our opt-out efforts had driven them, they could now say, well, look, now you'll have actionable data, and we won't just do reading and math, we'll test everything, and we'll have all this data, and it'll be really transparent and wonderful. And so all the things we said we hated about the end of year tests, the answer for them was all the time testing through EdTech. So then I picked up EdTech for a couple years, and I fought that, and I'm like, wow, it actually is a financialization of all of our social relations and public welfare systems through technology. And it's not just the schools, it's the healthcare system, it's incarceration, it's housing, it's food stamps. it's gonna be every single darn thing. So, I started digging in. This is kind of me. None of the stuff that I find is behind a paywall. Like, my husband works at a university, so I could get on his login if I needed to. But the folks who are doing this, if you actually have the time, and it really is a discipline to sit and actually read what the bad people say they're doing, because I know within academia, mostly your distinction is talking to other academics and they're your peers, but you're not looking to see what the bad people say they're doing in corporate industry. And they're just talking to each other. So I'm looking at what the corporate people are saying because they're just saying it right out. So I'll look at things like LinkedIn where, there's the community ambassador for Palantir, which runs ICE, and that's part of the social impact bond in Santa Clara. And I look at the 990, so big picture learning, which I think you have in Tulsa, Big Picture School. This is an early 990 tax form where they said essentially the program is to use telecommunications to create an educational model. So they frame it as project-based learning, but it's always been about tech. So I find these things, and then I show up in meetings because, like you guys, I have a macro version, but it's happening in real life in my neighborhoods and with people I know. So then I show up at the poverty meetings. I show up. This is the Chamber of Commerce. They had a meeting January 3 years ago. This is Girard College, ironically, which is the site of one of the most significant northern city civil rights struggles of integrating this private school. And it was built by Stephen Girard, who was the Bill Gates of his day. He was anthracite coal. And he built this giant wall that went like 4 city blocks, like a 20-foot high wall to keep people out. And there's only one way in and one way out. And so we didn't physically block it, but we made you couldn't attend. It was a Chamber of Commerce meeting about the role of business in education. And you couldn't come unless you were a member of the Chamber of Commerce. And they were talking about their role in our public schools. And so we just, we keep putting ourselves, as many of you do, out in the space and sort of contest that space. And so I do these maps. I make these giant maps. So this is a map of EduCare, Silicon Valley. Okay, so I have a good friend who's a professor at San Jose State. And so she actually is bumping up against this stuff all the time. And Santa Clara County is in Silicon Valley and is a test bed for at least 4 of these different financial deals, one of which EduCare is a center for pre-K, human capital investing. So I make these maps, and these maps, how I use them to tell stories. And it's also almost like, they talk about those mind rooms. It's like an annotated bibliography because this is Little Sis software, which unfortunately is funded by people who are the people I'm also fighting, but they haven't shut me down yet. So I screenshot everything. But these are interactive maps. You can click on any link and it will go to a database field and it will show the URL of this. So within this map, which is EduCare Silicon Valley, because you all have to have EduCare, it came out of Chicago, the University of Chicago, Jim Heckman and Diana Rauner, an ounce of prevention. And so that's over here. There's the movie To Sell It, No Small Matter. The Kaiser Foundation is over here. He works with Stanley Druckenmiller in the Blue Meridian. So all of the Harlem Children's Zone model is up this way. And then it goes out to Third Sector Capital that does all of the deal setup. And so I sort of built, and this is all the tech that is involved in pre-K because, clearly toddlers should be data mined. And this is like Head Start and these early foundations about using tech in Head Start. So I make these big maps. And I'm a mom, and this isn't my work, so they can't tell me to stop. This is I blog at Wrench in the Gears. So it's important to understand, for me, our education system it's situated within a landscape where all of these things are affecting the educational process. So within the city of Philadelphia, we're a city of deep poverty. We're one of the deepest poverty cities in the country. We're moving towards What Works government. Our former Democratic for Education Reform mayor, Michael Nutter, very clear, he left and went to work for Michael Bloomberg, being a What Works city spokesman, and I think you guys are part of that. And so all of this big data, AI, nudges, behavioral economics is being woven into our government. Machine learning and risk profiling. We're also part of the MacArthur Safety and Justice grants, as is Tulsa. Sort of smart policing, AI policing. We're moving to a point of, they say our future is eds and meds, but really our state regional economic plan. Every community has under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, a regional workforce plan. And like ours said, the top 10 high growth jobs are food service, home health care. There are 10 $12 an hour jobs. And of the 12, I think there were 2 like managers and accountants that paid $30 and $50 an hour. And the rest were, you couldn't live on them. You couldn't live as a single person on that, let alone a family. So we're talking about poverty, but literally the economy that they're situating us in is a gig economy where I have friends driving Instacart and Uber and multiple jobs just to get by. So it's important for me to understand this piece. So I'm here, I lean very left. It's kind of tricky for me because often the people who understand what I'm saying are not the people I think should understand what I'm saying. But it's not really about, in this moment of really highly partisan politics, it's more an issue of economy than political parties, because this thing that is moving forward with full participation of both parties. And they play different sides and they're playing different roles, but they're both getting things out of it. So I sort of frame it as the machine. Like, this is a machine that's been running for hundreds of years. In fact, as I have come to understand this machine, I really feel like it's based in the doctrine of discovery, which is back saying, like, certain people count more than others. If you're not part of like the Western canon, we can come, we can steal you, we can steal your land, we can kill your family, like it's our stuff. And like, so where we have come to today, which is Boston Dynamics, is a direct consequence of this dehumanization and of the sort of origin story of our country, which is really very much around land theft and genocide and enslavement of people, and we've never dealt with that. So like, I think going forward, like thinking of these machines and the Wendigo and like trying to figure out who's really fighting this, they win by keeping people in boxes. Now, I want to find people who want to fight with the understanding of this as racial capitalism and move forward in a system that actually tries to address right relationships and acknowledging this history as we move forward. Because my journey was both jumping forward and seeing the future, and then having some reckoning with having a better understanding of our racial history looking backwards. And I will highly recommend, and I think Julian has circulated, but Justin Leroy, he's a professor at UC Santa Barbara, and he was an early person doing research around social impact bonds, and there's a talk he gave around social impact bonds and the afterlife of slavery. And it's excellent. He gives a talk, actually these social impact bonds, it was part of an exhibit at the Whitney, which a Philadelphia artist, Cameron Rowland, he's a, what's the found art objects, ready-mades, like ready-made art, talking about carceral systems. And he used his money, it was an exhibit about debt at the Whitney, to buy into a social impact bond, because you could only get the contract language if you're an investor. And he framed it in the Whitney. And then Justin Leroy spoke, he gave this lecture about what this was. And this was about 5 years ago, and the thing has just taken off since. So I just want to give him credit on that. But I think as we're looking at resistance, there are people who've always been resisting this thing and looking towards the Black radical tradition and indigenous sovereignty, which especially is really important in Oklahoma, is where I come from in this space. This is Norbert Wiener. I would highly recommend this book. If you have not read this book, Yasha Levine's Surveillance Value, it's a military history of the internet. And it really unsettles our understanding of a lot of people in like this surveillance capitalism, the Sean Zuboff book, is like, oh, it's broken, the internet's broken, we can fix it. And I'm like, actually, it's not broken, it's doing what it was always meant to do. It was always a tool of the military against leftist organizing. And that is his premise, and it's very well documented. And he talks a lot about Norbert Wiener, who was someone who was essentially a brilliant man who was almost like a human computer in World War II, calculating in his head the algorithms for the missile launches. And he was early on in AI and cybernetics, and he realized later, like, oh my gosh, what have we done? And he spoke out, and he was accused of being a communist, and his reputation was ruined, but he really was heartfelt in his opposition. So just to say, this is all the headspace of where people think this is going. I'm not saying it's a done deal. Like, they've been figuring this is coming since the 50s. We can still fight it, but if we don't even know where they're coming from, we won't be equipped to fight it the way we need to fight it. So, 5 things to keep in mind. So, Fourth Industrial Revolution. Everything is situated. They're in Davos this week. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, ubiquitous computing, machine learning, predictive analytics, these sensing environments, much of which is based in automation and displacement of people with machines. Essentially, all of the stuff that we do online ultimately signals intelligence. Like, we have to understand it as, like, when they talk about Google, like, oh, look, we can tell where the next flu epidemic, like the flu outbreak is going to come because we look at the searches. Like, it's all, as we push telehealth, teletherapy, EdTech, it's sensing, and even if it's not sensing to a specific military entity, it's sensing into this machine learning system. Like we're creating these systems, so we're sending the signals, and it's important to understand the EdTech as an industry, even though, I mean, it went way back into the 50s with Plato and everything, but it really took off because as cloud-based computing rose, Clinton in the mid-90s issued this executive order 13111 that said, essentially, distance learning is important for the military. This is really great. It's not just good on submarines. We'll have all federal employees train online, and actually, we should just have all Americans benefit from this wonderful distance learning opportunity. And that became this huge corporate, not just in the software and the hardware, but the cloud computing. And so, you know, the NSA has their big data center in Bluffdale. It can hold 100 years worth of internet on every single person, so that's sitting out in Utah. The badges concept and this idea of like Arizona State and GSV are all tied in with this billion-dollar EdTech industry. There's 4 divisions that came out of this executive order, advanced distributed learning, and you should look them up and just be familiar. There's an administrative office in Alexandria, an academic office at University of Wisconsin-Madison, the workforce development office is in Memphis, and the military one is in Orlando. And so all of those are, like, they all overlap, but the idea of gamification, simulations, sensing technologies, virtual reality technologies, those are all coming from a collaboration of both the military with the labor force development, also with the entertainment industry. So, so it's a global world. We just have to understand, I mean, I think we generally know that, but once you have a cloud-based proof of concept, it can be anywhere on the other side of the world next week, okay? And it's not that we need to have international solidarity because this is transnational global capital that's happening. You know, I think there are some people who are very conservative who are framing this as like an issue of the Constitution or a nationalist framing. The reality is that the people in China, the people in Brazil, the people in Cape Town are poor. It's a class issue. It's an issue of people who are the masses and a very few with very concentrated power and connections to military force and technological force. So this is an example. It's a blockchain identity system, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But this was developed in China. But the person, he went to school in Hong Kong, he went to school at Columbia University, then he went to London School of Economics. So he's an international guy. He's hooked up with this other foundation that does blockchain identity in Switzerland. So they're meshing the Swiss finance piece of blockchain with the Chinese AI facial recognition capacity. And so they just met in a room like this for a week, and they got together and set up a deal. So they've synthesized their knowledge base. And now they're doing home visits where these blockchain smart contracts are verified. It's a Chinese company, but they're in Boa Vista, Brazil, which is where the Bolsa Familia, which is a payment system. So these families are being piloted that they come into their homes to document impact investments in these children, and is verified through a tablet-based filming program. Okay? So we've got, and the other company that they're working with has a pilot in South Africa. So we've got China, we've got Brazil, we've got South Africa, we have Switzerland. But guess what? The mayor of Boa Vista came to this very exclusive pre-K global investor program in New York City in 2018. And no child advocates were allowed to attend, only business people. So like this is what we're up against. We have to understand, I think some people would like to pit us against the Chinese, some people would like to pit these other folks. No, this is about capital versus poor families. So they're looking at financing people's commodities. Like that is what the data is about. This guy, Tom Vander Ark, he writes a lot about Dallas. I don't know if he's written about Tulsa. You should like Google Tom Vander Ark in Tulsa, see what he's written.
He's our superintendent. Yeah, he loves her.
Okay, yeah. So this is a crazy thing. Y'all have to look this up. It's called Global Education Futures Forum. And my friend Emily, who's a second grade teacher in Maine, and I kind of dug into this because I found Emily's blog post, and you know, she said, don't click this unless you want to go down the rabbit hole. And then I went down the rabbit hole. I'm like, oh, wow. And people are like, how do you figure this out? I'm like, well, they made a map. I really just watch the news and look at their map. I mean, it's like they have every segment. This is just a tiny bit, a zoom-in part. But they say, like, what they think. It's a Russian, it's based in Russia, but it's global. Tom Vander Ark was a Gates guy, and now he has his own venture capital firm, but it's in Argentina, Asia. But Pavel Luksha, who is with Skolkovo in Moscow, which is their Silicon Valley, was working with MIT. So it's all together. Like the Russians, I'm like, yeah, but MIT's over there too. So, but they're looking at investing in people as human capital, and that is the plan. So they're looking. So what did we learn from the mortgage crisis, right? Like, so in the decades since then, the wealth has become even more concentrated, right? And so how does that wealth circulate as poverty increases, right? Like people can't buy enough to keep the money going. You have to turn people into the next mortgage-backed securities, and that's done through the privatized public services. And then, and essentially just smart cities. We really have to understand urban sensing environments. And that I think in some ways, I talk a lot about, I was working with, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of James Kilgore, but he's an advocate around incarceration issues. And I'm like, Jim, like we're the livestock. Like we need to look at how they're using Internet of Things to manage domestic livestock in geofencing, because that's us, right? And I think I've written a piece, and it's interesting since you guys are part of the MacArthur program. I call it prison reform to incarcerate the world. So we're shifting our model of mass incarceration to change the level, the engagement of state supervision over people, because we've developed a capacity to track people through devices and through drone policing and other systems, turn the world into a jail, essentially, for people, and geofence people. And the other piece of that is I think we need to be looking at Gaza and what's happening, because I think in many respects a lot of the biometric identity systems and border crossing systems were refined at the Israeli border crossings. In Gaza, this as an open-air prison, the largest open-air prison in the world, like that, and the suppression of any conversation around that is that they really don't, and that was Hewlett-Packard, like that developed, that was our technology to do that. So this is also a very good book, it's dry, but it predated 1984, and essentially it's about living in a panopticon where everyone is a number, and what it's like to live mentally, like within that state of supervision. So I'm just going to say just a couple words about this and then just open up. So these are images from the future of education as they imagine it being if they get their way, like in the next decade or so. So this is also a GEF map. This is the big one, and then this is just an inset. But this is education for them, which is certainly an isolated. It's like it's you as your own brand and product and consumer version, and then that you become an investable commodity with tracking achievements, reputation scoring, financing, you're co-financing, biometric monitoring. You don't have teachers, you have mentors and role models, like you track, on these systems, and it goes on from there. So that's what GF and Tom Vander Ark think school is. KnowledgeWorks is a core player in this idea of learning ecosystem. So you don't have a school, you have a drop-in center. Now in this case, the little kids will probably be at a community partner, and it will probably be like Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, maybe a faith-based with AmeriCorps watching them for the little kids. And the high school kids will just have a tablet and roam around with Pokemon Go education. So it's playlist, it's personalized, and surveilled, really. But I'm trying to say, like, the educators' jobs will diversify, meaning like there won't be any, like, essentially educators will be entrepreneurs of learning content until most of the educators are avatars, and AI is kind of where things are going. And when I first saw this is about 4 years ago, I thought, I'm in a school district where it's already really challenging for people, and we have limited choice, but there's some magnet options. There's preferred schools, schools that have certain reputations, and the stress that goes along with trying and navigating high school choice to navigate that landscape, even for people with a lot of privilege and access to resources. What does this look like? Picture you're a single parent, maybe English isn't your first language, maybe one of your kids has special needs, and then all of a sudden you're learning opportunities for the year. Every kid is putting together 20 or 30 learning badge experiences. And in a city where there's gun violence and child trafficking. Like, what does that even look like? Like, why are we not talking about that? Nobody's going to talk about that until it's too late. This is another KnowledgeWorks thing. The little girl is interacting on the tablet with a biometric thing that's tracking her engagement with the content and sensing if she's anxious and like comforting her to say it's okay to ask for help. But the creepiest part of this is that she has a badge that is going to connect you to libraries like this library, because our library is being taken over, because you won't have school, but you can come to the library and you can transfer money from the learning accounts to these various outsourced providers. Okay, so that badge is really important. And then the beacons, the Internet of Things beacons. So this is the augmented reality world, which looks silly. A lot of it's they're using it under like advertising, like geofenced like push notifications. But the museums are being set up for this. So like you wander around and you sign up and it'll say, here's some information here. But again, in this environment, they can decide who gets what information, depending on your back profile or what they think you will be interested in or engage you. But it can create feedback loops, right? This is really creepy. This is when you hear a shift about Montessori schools. You'll start to hear a lot about Montessori schools. So the EdTech people love Montessori schools because the kids are all independent and they're all doing their own thing with limited supervision. This is the Wildflower Montessori chain in Boston. And it had a parent from MIT. They put sensors in the kids' slippers. So they could, because they said it's really important to know about, we care about social activities, and we'd really like to know where the kids are and who they're interacting with and how often they're connected to the teacher. And what things in the classroom have beacons, like are they in the block corner 2/3 of the time? Like they're tracking it in their shoes. So again, this is something they could do tomorrow if it were socially acceptable. If they could say like, okay, in your smart uniform, here it's nanotechnology, and we're just going to know all this stuff. The other piece is this is a really good video, and when I get done, like if I get your email, I'll send you the slide shares. But this XAPI technology is what allows the tracking of completion of tasks into a learning locker, this like online learning locker that was like check-a-box education. But it's very simple. Everything has to be reduced to a noun, a verb, and an object. Yeah. And so but it's called We Can Track It, right? And so if you watch this video, that's only a minute and a half. These little analog things flip down, but it shows you like, this kid played this Army video game, and then he went to the Marine Corps, but then he failed, but then he went to the CIA. And it shows his rank up to they read this book. They watched this thing. They had this, and but everything is reductive to this narrow thing, but then they also are tracking it. So again, the panopticon. And then you guys know about BrainCo, right? Harvard, thanks a lot, Harvard. They tested off in China. I think China's kicking them out now, but knowing your engagement. And I think they were trying to say, in a group activity, that perpetual problem where who's doing the work? Who's actually doing the work in this group project, right? You have BrainCo, you'd be like, oh, we know who is doing the work, And then one small part, it might be nice, but this is a super pernicious thing. And if you understand Sesame credit and social credit scoring in China, and that we are shifting more towards a global economic system that won't be based on fiat currency, it'll almost be behavioral script. And I almost talk about it when you go, I don't know, do you guys have CVS drugstores here or whatever? Yes. And you go and you get a 6-foot long receipt with coupons, and it's almost like that's people who use those. It's almost like a different kind of currency. If you use that, it actually substantially changes the price you pay for things, but you have to give your data. And so it's this script content. So these classroom management tools that come with token economies are hugely popular right now, and PBIS and token economics. So this is a program that is, I think, a competitor to Class Dojo, which is really popular, but it's called Red Critter. Now, Red Critter has a second version that's a career leaderboard program. So you can be trained in 3rd grade up so that when you get to the executive suite, you can also still be on the leaderboard, earning your behavior credits. But it has facial recognition. You can see the badges. Again, this is badging and giving points. And this, it's not very clear, but it's a mapping of social traits. So it says autonomy, grit, enthusiasm, effectiveness, and boldness. And so as you're zipping, the teachers is spending all their time zinging points to kids and making these maps. So this is a kid who's evidently very effective but not very gritty. You know, like, I mean, and then as we move forward with AI hiring and AI people analytics and automated hiring systems for gig economy jobs, stuff like that gets fed in, right? And they're like, I'm looking for a kid that fits this profile, or a teenager or whatever. And if your thing doesn't line up with that thing, like, you're not going to get considered.
Just like the personality test they give at the beginning of dinner.
Yeah. And then data analytics, the visuals are really big. This is Yet Analytics. Yet Analytics is paired with Hewlett Packard, and they're doing human capital investing globally. And this is bad. So this is augmented reality, virtual reality, workforce training. This kid, what looks like what? I mean, 13, maybe 12? Yeah, like this is a little kid being trained in an Amazon warehouse with VR goggles. Okay, because these are the jobs that they're going to have. And this is an augmented reality. Like, you don't need to really learn how to work the machine. We'll just like tell you point arrows, like, because next it'll be a different machine because you'll have a different gig. So you don't actually learn the job because you're only doing this for 2 days, and we'll put you somewhere else. So here, just lift up your tablet. And there's a really good book called Rainbow's End by Werner Vinge, who was a professor emeritus at UC San Diego, and he was the first person to postulate the singularity. But Rainbow's End is the book that talks about sort of near future dystopia of augmented reality, which I think it was published in 2006, but it really, like, when I first saw Pokemon Go and I knew what was coming with this, I'm like, oh, this is the test case. Like, are people going to get behind this? And, like, clearly they did at the time, even though it's kind of gone down, but, like, they were really jazzed about it. Yeah. Someone said, listen, if we're looking at Pokemon Go, people have written about the ethics of virtual world building, and, like, that was one of the recommendations. So the thing is, JCA Solutions, and this is the next piece, and this is what people don't understand about VR, is that it's pulling behavioral data. Okay, it's pulling behavioral data out of the haptics and the eye motions and the biometrics, the pulse rates. So that image I showed before was part of a study where they were talking about a competency-based education like concept of how to properly pet a dog. So they broke down the task, which is check a box, did you do the competency, did you pet the dog correctly, into all of these bits and pieces, and like, did the child do all these things? But they're not actually petting any real dog. They're doing it in virtual reality with hand motions in the VR. And so you can see like what the data that they're getting. Did you pet, how nervous was the child? Did they actually pet the dog? Like, all of these weird things they're capturing. And then this is the measurable information that they're getting out of this. Eye focus, biometrics, heart rate monitors. And people, when they come and pitch these VR headsets as like field trips, the teachers don't get it. Like, they don't know that this is the end game plan. It's like, oh, you don't, like this idea of the learning ecosystem, for a while I was like, how's that work in North Dakota? Because North Dakota schools are being made over. Governor Burgum was former Microsoft. I mean, I think he's the former governor now. But how is that, what does that look like? Where do you go for a learning, I mean, I can see it in Philadelphia, and like my, property rate's going to go up great because I'm in the museum district. Like, all the people move to the suburbs. They're out of luck because we got all the good badge opportunities now. But like, what does it look like? Well, in North Dakota, it looks like you strap on a VR headset. And that's their project-based learning, is through virtual reality. It's not any kind of real project. So this is talking about the XAPI badging, that we can track it. It's going to go on your phone. We're a city of LRNG, which is a collective shift city. It's part of the MacArthur Foundation. They spun off Collective Shift with hundreds of millions of dollars. There's about a dozen of us. Dallas is one, we're one, Chicago, San Diego. They're mostly smart cities. And it's this idea, again, if you didn't know the pernicious backstory of the city as your classroom, right? And it's kind of like, well, when I was in school, like, field trips are great, and I love having a culturally diverse city and go out and learn things. Sure, that's great. But it's not if essentially what you're saying is, but you don't actually get school anymore, right? Like, now it's just that. And you're doing it in a militarized policing environment. And you better get all the badges because, there's 50 kids behind you who are trying to get that next gig. So, like, that's what it becomes. So the playlist education and the badging is getting onto the phone, and it's doing this through the XAPI. And this is, again, just what do we know about how the hiring goes, is that it's going through competencies, and increasingly they want to know social, emotional, and behavioral information. Because if you can imagine like how freaked out, like if they actually accomplish what we think they're going to accomplish, people who came up in other worlds, like it's a mental strain. Like it will, like they're even talking about now, like how do we know what's real and what's not real? Like when they're building synthetic people, like when the army and the entertainment industry are building synthetic people, how do we know what we know? Like philosophically, it becomes very hard. And what happens when all of a sudden there's no stable job and you're just doing a gig? They know people are going to start to fall apart. So they want to know who the resilient people are. They want to know who the compliant people are. Like they don't want another Snowden. Like no more homeschool kids are getting in the NSA. Like they need to know that in advance, and it's all about risk profiling. So this new mastery transcript program, which I think they're modeling the Dallas program on, is very much about mindset, like fosters integrity, leads through influence, persistence. That's the stuff they're going to put on report cards.
How do you measure these things?
Well, I mean, Angela Duckworth is working all on that because she's the character lab gal.
Okay.
And she's working with Mark Zuckerberg's money. So she's getting it figured out. I'm sure they're going to have lots of rubrics. I mean, but that's like the red critter, and I don't know if it's arbitrary that someone is deciding it, but at this point, like eventually it might be artificial vision is deciding it. Like, the red critter, it's a teacher that's still behind the zinging the points, but at some point it might be the camera who says, am I a lively, do I have you engaged? What is your heart rate? You're all sitting in smart chairs. Like, I can like track the visual analytics of your participation.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
One thing on how to measure this stuff, like you can use the law of big numbers and cardinality, and like all you really have to do is like rank things above or below each other. You don't have to have like a number. And then the fact that the data is so big and there's so many data points, like on average you're going to be right.
Yeah. And I'm not like, so that's really helpful because I only bump up against a lot of the stuff and I'm like wide but not deep. And then this is the last bit about human capital. So this is a Federal Reserve. Like the Federal Reserve is very involved in the Human Capital Bond program. They're talking about the ISAs as the new debt service, your income sharing agreements. And again, this is below. I don't know if you can see this, but this is also from GEF. Again, this is a projection. But they talk about a people NAIR. Fortunes are made up of people. The fortune size depends on the quality of the human capital. Okay? And so I'm just saying this because I think we need to understand these things within our history of enslavement of people, our history of neo-enslavement and prison labor and dispossession, and that we have never done, like we have always had these terrible domination and unfairness, and that automating it is probably only going to make it even more brutal. Right? And so I think there's some folks who'd say, oh, well, we're just going to automate it and make it nice and tidy. No, you automate our history into this, and then it becomes even harder to touch and stop. So this people layer thing really talks to that. So I'm just going to take pause for a second. Does anybody want to chime in on those? It's a lot.
Yes. Well, I mean, I see in my library we have lots of EPIC people, and they were just in yesterday. It was the end of their semester or something, and I can see where they are marketing and gearing themselves towards lower income families because it's less expensive, and you get money for internet, you get money for outings, you get a laptop, but it's all, you're just doing the basics, and you're not, I hear the teachers, they're not really actually teaching, and so, I mean, they're just mining those kids for data. I mean,
and that's the challenge when we talk about the digital divide, and I think in a city of ours where people in low-income parts of the city have been treated so badly and deprived of resources that when someone comes in and says, hey, we're going to set you all up with Chromebooks, and people say, darn it, we deserve those things. We have been deprived of that, and gosh, so someone is finally listening. And they don't, I think people aren't conditioned to understand them as means of digital control. means of creating value for corporations. And it's hard to have that figuring out how to have the conversation, because again, until we all step off the Chromebooks, it's hard to say like, well, y'all should, be better. But I think people deserve to know, because you think of what, COINTELPRO, right, in the 70s, and essentially what we've done is we've just invited them into every part of our life, and now, again, being automated. So that's important.
And what concerns me particularly about that, one of the things that concerns me particularly is that we're using publicly funded public space in order to do this data mining. We pay for that library.
Yeah.
And it also, it gives these people access to the privacy of the library. Like they don't have Microsoft Word, they have Libro, right? We use Libro in the.
We use Word.
You do use Word?
Yeah.
Okay, so just in your public library, that I learned about Libro from you. Anyway, so.
But like our library system
they're
in
not allowed
Philadelphia.
to know what I'm doing. When I go to the library, you're not allowed to know what book I'm taking out. That must be driving them insane. So if you have these people, in an EPIC program in there, you have a little more access to what might be going on.
But I would love to mobilize more librarians, because honestly, our libraries have been taken over by this process. They're throwing out our books. It's mostly ebooks now. They cleared out all of the closed stacks and put in like catering tables or like a civic engagement center that nobody goes to. It's just empty furniture. And they left the shelves. I mean, it was almost a slap in the face. They left the shelves empty of books with some screens hanging there. And our library was part of a digital badging program. This program has come in through, it's called Peer-to-Peer University in South Africa, that was backed by Open Society. And the University of Chicago, or the Chicago City Library System did this rolling out program with STEM education as a summer school program with badges in the Chicago library system, and it's part of LRNG. And with DePaul, and that's an LRNG city. We were part of this badging program, and it never really took off, because they're like, oh, don't worry about that. Like that was just a summer thing. And I'm like, no, it's simmering. They don't have digital identity yet. Like once they have the digital payment systems, it's going to surface back. But the peer-to-peer university concept, and the guy who left there and ended up going to MIT Media Lab, is that people come into libraries to learn together, which isn't such a bad thing, but it was around the television at the time. And they're putting facial recognition cameras in libraries. They're putting facial recognition cameras in the San Jose libraries. So what does that mean if all of a sudden you say, we're bringing people together as groups to learn in digital space in the libraries with facial recognition cameras? And like, I need the librarian, like I need to find people who are willing to say, no, this is not that, we don't want our space used this way. And you're very right about the public piece.
Think about what they're doing with all the cell phones, the 5G. I mean,
yeah, the 5G is going to run the Internet of Things.
That is, we're going to have that in our hands all the time.
Yeah.
And,
Well, in our hands eventually, yeah.
In our hands.
Yeah, in our hands, the RFID chip. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you gave us so much stuff.
I know. It's so, I have like 100 more
and-
slides, so like.
And like, I mean, I think you've clarified a lot of things for me, for sure, because first let me say, I think you're absolutely right. It's the economics of the thing that's the crucial key, right?
Yeah.
So I have a clearer idea now that you've got, government, you've got private investment going to providers who are going to produce measurable outcomes, and that is efficiencies in dealing with what you call human capital. That is to say, providing a stream of laborers who are capable of doing these little tasks efficiently, right? Branson's right that, like, it's a quantum thing. That is to say, it's all the aggregate, right? So when you look at human capital, right? And actually, I mean, I had this idea when I was like studying Soviet literature, including Zamyatin, by the way, of like quantum politics. So for example, under Stalin, if you are a member of a certain class or a certain ethnicity, okay, you're going to the gulag or we're relocating you wherever. It doesn't matter who you are as an individual because, right, you may as an individual not fit the norm, but on average, if we know your background is bourgeois, blah, 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 you're going to, okay. So, but so the notion of human capital means that the individual disappears completely. Yeah. All we're looking for is a reasonable large number of people who can do these jobs. I don't know whether it was on your blog or where I read this, but I read about deliveries in Berkeley little
Oh, yeah, the
robots,
Kiwi bots.
right?
Yeah.
So
In Bolivia,
it's
they're
cheaper
driving.
to pay
somebody
guys
drive.
in Bolivia $2 an hour or whatever to run the little robots that deliver crap in Berkeley than to pay actual human beings. Now, those guys who are making $2 an hour is a perfect example of the gig economy, right?
Yeah.
They're not
But it's a
getting
globally
insurance.
platformed gig economy.
Right, right. So,
Right? So that's
they can do these little jobs. Why? Well, we need these workers now. We may never get full automation. Maybe
Right.
we will, maybe we won't. But we need these people who can run these machines, like the dude in Amazon, the 13-year-old thing, right? So we're going to provide all these guys. You're absolutely right. There are the people who are sitting at the top who are doing this stuff. And then there are all these other people. But the horrible thing is that, like, I'm thinking it from the perspective of TU, right? Which, by the way, our president said a couple of years ago, we want to aim at first-generation college students, and those kids need jobs, right? They don't have luxuries and stuff, and so this. But why? Because we want government funding, and I know TU wants to move to short-term credentialing and stuff like this. Okay, they're not like we're not going to teach Yevgeny Zamyatin's.
No.
And even if
There's
we
no
do,
content.
the kids are not going to be prepared to understand it. That's a rather deep book. It's got mathematics, it's got poetry, it's a whole thing. It's part of the literary tradition. So, like, we're not even, like, most people are not even going to be able to understand what is happening to them.
It's fragmented.
Right.
Everything, there's no comprehension.
Right.
There's no.
And then, like, the last thing is, you're absolutely right. I mean, like, people I talk to, the person in the street, if you said, what do you think about giving Chromebooks, right? Gates Foundation, who was it? Zuckerberg's wife, right? Giving Chromebooks to TPS. Great. Who doesn't need a Chromebook, right? But of course, anyone involved in education knows this is a horrible idea.
Yeah.
We're not going to have teachers. We're going to have,
AI,
facilitators.
yeah.
We're going to walk around the class and go,
Database.
"Oh, good job, Jenny, you know." And
Zing
it turns out that,
points.
yeah, exactly right.
I'd
Zing
like to
points.
point out how it actually works in practice. When you get a call, excuse me, your children were, a group of children were Googling things they shouldn't have been, Google image searching stuff, right? It's like leaving them out in public on the, like in a public place. I mean, this is the internet. They were not, the filters were not properly installed. It was horrifying. And this was last year, and it repeated again. And so I just heard from a parent whose second grader was watching porn on the computer, the Chromebook. So, right? This is horrifying, and it's all covered up. So how it actually gets executed in practice is a lot different than, how are they really going to track my kid who, was on a school library computer, and she couldn't log out for some reason. There was a glitch, and then my nephew came in who was like, oh, I was going to, I just put a bunch of wrong answers into your, thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
He was joking. He didn't do it. But the point is because I made sure, I was like, what?
Well, when you log in at the library, right, and you'd forget to log back out on your school email. Like, Philadelphia's student emails were Google emails. They were run through Google. I wouldn't let my child have a Google email. I was probably the only parent in the district. I'm like, y'all are training your replacements. Like, Google's AI runs off the training data. So all the stuff in Google Classroom, like, you're building your replacement. So I don't have to participate in all of that. So.
We're going to have to leave in a few minutes, so I want to leave here feeling a little bit optimistic. I don't feel that way right now. The danger of this is it's so complex, as Jake was saying, it's so fragmented, people just can't grasp it. But you said you're working on the ground, right? You do have an activist dimension to your life. It's not just giving a talk that's this broad. And so
it's mostly me. I mean, it's hard because I think, like, the folks I used to, when I was organizing with Opt Out, I had a small group of teachers that were with me. It didn't, like, they're overworked. Like, these are public school teachers, right? The teachers never stepped up on the tech. And I asked them for 3 years. And I'm almost to the point of, like, I can't save you. Like, if no one is going to do this, I can't save you from yourself. No, but, like, we need, because then I turn to poverty, because I'm like, you know what? If you can't do it, this is affecting everyone. I'm going to go to the people who are in addiction, because we're the center of the heroin epidemic, and this is coming for them. So maybe those people will work.
So it's got to be possible. I mean, Marx wrote incredibly complex.
Yeah, I need it. I want an Afrofuture zine. If anybody knows, like, that's what I want. I want, like, a nice, like, 20-page Afrofuture zine that just distills it down. Like, I could, like, collaborate, because I'm not artistic. I make little videos with construction paper. But, I mean, I do, like, a blockchain identity, which is, like, kind of crazy. But We have to figure out how to tell it. But the thing is, people have been deconditioned to think. So if it's not a meme, if it's not a Vine, it's not like 3 minutes. They're like, tell me in 3 minutes. I'm like, I can't. Like Black Mirror does it. Like Black Mirror is setting us all up. People like Black Mirror. I mean, they're interested in it. Like clearly those people are effective at channeling this in a way that leaves people with a creepy factor. They're like, oh, maybe I need to think about that. So like, if there was a way to, but I would say 97% of the people in the world don't want this world.
Right.
Like, why would we, because what we're doing is, and I think Lynn is going to speak to this, is pushing people into a P20 pipeline. Why would we feed children into an automated economy that doesn't value human life or our value our work, or value our communities? Why would we allow this Davos-centered economy? Why would we feed our children into that? Because the education system is directly linked to the economy. Like if all of a sudden I say, I'm going to just opt out of all this. My kids get no badges. Okay, fine. They're 20. And the AI system said, what's in your badge locker? And we didn't do the badges. If there's not a parallel economy and they're not someone who could live off the land, like what does that look like? So we have to be able to educate in a mass, I think. And maybe we're not there yet. Maybe y'all are the test bed, right? Like it seems like things are moving fast on all sorts of fronts. Maybe at some point people will be like, oh, okay. Maybe, I mean, I can collaborate. Maybe y'all are the ones to figure out how to say it.
Well, part of the problem would be the policies that are put in place that corner, as we saw at the school board meeting last night.
Yeah.
Policies that parents were opposed to, and that did not benefit the students. And incurious members of the Board of Education permit these, I would say, violations of our children's rights, of our rights as parents.
Yeah.
They allow them to, and it's just like, too bad, so sad, sorry. You know, without really...
It's gonna involve direct action. Like, it will be involved physical
when you're
direct
talking
action.
about the
I'm not talking about violence, but this system is bipartisan. It is running transnational global capital.
Yep.
This capital is the Vatican Bank. It's the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. It's Jack Ma. It's Blackstone. It's every bit. So to think that we're going to appeal to their good senses to say, and that's where I was when I did opt out. I'm like, oh, they don't know. If they just knew how bad this was, they would stop. No, our country is based on doing bad things. So it takes mass movements to stop it. And like we're 50-year cycle out the civil rights movement. Like we're coming back. And I haven't even gotten to this part, and maybe this won't happen. But this is tied to blockchain identity. This is blockchain identity systems that are being built. And so we are going to need an abolition movement against blockchain identity.
Well, and that really speaks to. You go, because I'm already went.
Well, I was going to say we have that in the works here in Oklahoma. So we've got a telepresencing bill that's been passed into law just recently, where your avatar can do all of the business that you as a person can do.
Sign your name.
Like Oklahoma is on the forefront of this, and people are not paying attention at all.
No.
We've got a pilot for a digital identity driver's license, which was it's run by the same company that
Augmented
the teachers-
identity. It's called augmented identity. Idemia.
Yeah,
They call it augmented identity. It's augmented reality.
that's
on
what
your
all
driver's
the
license.
teachers at TPS are using that
Idemia.
to track their professional development.
Do you
I
mind,
saw it on
do we have time for me to maybe
Yeah,
just
yeah,
go
yeah.
through the human
Oh, yeah.
capital future stuff? Because I think this will help a little bit. So again, I talked a little bit about like the problem is we have like concentrated wealth. And how do you extract, this is like from my little video, like how do we get money out of these people, and we have to commodify them as data. And this is Robert McChesney. He's a professor in communications, but he and John Nichols wrote a book a while back about, it's called the Fight Against a Jobless Economy and a Citizenless Democracy. And they're actually more hopeful than I am. But he was saying that they were invited to Davos, like what you hear if you're in Davos and what they know is going on versus what actually makes it out in the media. And Davos is going on this week, so it's very timely. And that one of his PhD students had been in a gathering, and this is 2016, so this is even pre-2016, where they were saying, like, hey, should we be worried about this automation? We're hearing a lot about automation. And at the time, the answer was, the CEO said, it's not only serious, but we have the capacity right now to completely automate every factory we have in the world, including Germany. But we can't because, and this is the quote translated from German, if we were to automate our factories in Germany, the middle class would burn. German social order would collapse. That's how serious, in his view, it was. Okay, so this is 2016. So they're trying to figure it out. That's what UBI is about. That's what the increased militarized policing is about. When this switch flips, when the 5G comes on, and is this a 7-year? Is this a 10? Is this a 15? Like, but when they, and you know, some of it may be like cold fusion. Like maybe they haven't figured the energy. They can't get enough oil out of fracking. Like when they flip this thing, and it will flip quick because in a cloud-based world it will go quickly. How do you control? Like, what does that even look like? And so it's systems of soft control, which is putting public benefits on blockchain and controlling people's behavior and access to their living, the ability to survive, their food, their housing, and their health care, and their training, which will be training to comply to this system on a digital lock e-wallet. And it is also policing systems that are increasingly automated and tied to both predictive analytics and risk profiling, but also like high-tech military robotics and drones. And I'm not, but they're building this now. And like I mean, when I'm doing this work, I mean, it's hard. Like, I never knew that the Army had something called the Mad Scientist Division. And like, they would put papers on the internet for public review, like saying, like, the TRADOC has the Mad Scientist Division, and they're saying, like, our future is in urban megacity warfare, and we're scaling the tanks for urban scale.
We have to say no to that narrative.
I know. Well, but I mean,
they've accepted.
No,
That's
why I'm coming out to say, y'all, there's a Mad Scientist Initiative, and it said, you know, this isn't top secret. This isn't anything that's actually like. I mean, I know. Why do you think I flew to Tulsa and Dallas? Like, I have a 19-year-old. I mean, I may not be around that long, but I want to build a different world for them. So this is how this stuff. This is my little. I think some of you guys have it on the handout. Okay, pay for success. What it started out as, like, so they need to figure out this game. This is a game, really. It's a money game. It's a global money game. They have to set the rules of the game. The game is called outcomes-based government contracts. And it's fascinating because it's been in the works for at least 30 years. And they've been refining it. And so the breakout piece came with something called the social impact bond. There were only about 12 of them in the country. Some were around pre-K, some were around housing, some were around anti-recidivism. But they couldn't scale them. And it doesn't work for the game if you can't have tens of thousands of these things. And it was too complicated. So then they backpedaled and they came up with stuff called pay for success. So you'll hear all about, but now pay for success is even going away. It's an outcomes-based contract that's automated. Increasingly, the goal is to automate it on blockchain with a smart contract. So the precondition is austerity, because you can't outsource government's operations if you actually have a tax base. So you have to create the disaster in austerity to facilitate the outsourcing. So then you say, well, we're going to do what works government. So we'll do it, but only if it's worthwhile, like if it works. Then, and that's how the bipartisan part comes in, because the liberal side said, well, we're still taking care of people. That's good. And the conservative side says, and we're only paying if it works. So we're being fiscally prudent. And so both sides just love what works government, which comes out of Michael Bloomberg philanthropy's program. So, but the working part doesn't mean it's actually going to solve the problem, because when you create a global market in poverty, you are disincentivized to actually stop poverty. You're incentivized to make more poverty but manage it efficiently. So that's what the program is, right? Well-managed poverty with some policing. So you pick a success metric that will look good on a dashboard and that your investors can get, because you need, and it looks like a third grade test score. You know, but it will be something else too. Like you could pick it and it's just a number that can live on a dashboard. There's a deal in Connecticut, and it's low-income women who have substance use issues, and they're flagged for child protective services. Okay, these women make under $10,000 a year, and they live in Connecticut, and they have children. Okay, so their success metric is that they have clean screens, and there's a Yale, because all of these higher education, these prestigious universities are stamping, they're giving their stamps of approval on the rules of this game, which legitimizes it, which sucks. And so Yale says, oh, here's our intervention, like go visit these people 3 times a week and have them pee in a cup and talk to them a little bit. And at the end, the investors in that included a French bank, BNP Paribas, and QB Insurance, which is an Australian insurance company. So these women are really global investment commodities that they're paying properly in a cup. But at the end of the game, they're still making $10,000 a year. That doesn't materially change their circumstances. So that's what a narrow success. You can maybe make them, their numbers in their screens go one direction and pay somebody out, but it doesn't change their life situation. So in classrooms, it looks like EdTech. So investors front the money for the services. It could be that we're fronting for the social worker, we're fronting for the devices. The investors put in, and then, but that debt gets securitized. So here's the thing of this game. The game isn't in the deal. People are like, I don't see how you make much money on this. Like, there's not a lot of money in this cost, because it's all predicated on a cost offset. And they negotiate a profit, but it's not a lot. It's not enough to make a global market. The big game is in the securitization part. That's just like it was in the asset-backed securities. It's the gambling. But you can't gamble on a game that doesn't exist. So the deals are the game, but the securitization is the big game. And then, and the trick is, in the society, as society falls apart, well, you'd like to make money on people, but you also want to control people. So it's very convenient that if you have a data-driven solution, then you get to watch people all the time and collect data on them all the time. So essentially, it just sanctions you to surveil them all the time if they're part of one of these deals. So I will mention, and we just found this out on the ride over, there is a social impact bond in Santa Clara called Partners in Wellness. Okay, it's one of the first mental health social impact bonds. Okay, these deals have a third-party evaluator to make it all good. Like, it's fair because somebody impartial third party is reviewing the data. Well, 2 of the 4 social impact bonds in Santa Clara, the data is reviewed by Palantir. Okay? So for the homeless data and the people with mental health problems, Palantir, which is running government contracts and predictive policing contracts, Customs and Border Patrol contracts, they're running your data. And it's Peter Thiel, a super evil company. So if you have a mental health situation or you need housing, and God forbid someone in your family doesn't have all their papers lined up, well, Palantir's got your data. So, and it turns out the woman, what was her name? Lapidus. Lapidus is the last name. She's with one of the Oklahoma Families and Children groups. She was connected in a conference with Telecare, which was the service provider. So when I'm saying global, what touches Santa Clara County is in your backyard here in Tulsa. These people all travel in little packs, and they all go to the same conferences, even though they're spread all over the world. I mean, they're spread all over the country, but they all know each other. So you're not that far off. And then, so a third party says yay or nay on the deal, and the deal happens, and then it starts over again. But the thing is, and they'll say it pay for success, but the trick with the success is once you securitize it, there's somebody betting that you're not going to get it. They're going to somebody's going to short the kids. So when you start doing these games, when you say, well, we're only paying if it works, well, yeah, but then there's somebody going to bet it doesn't work. And it's a mess. Like when you're talking about people's lives, the lives of vulnerable people, traumatized people, and that you know that you're not actually going to fix their situation. And it's bad. I mean, the worst part is the people who are directly affected, but think about how traumatic it is to be the administrator of that system. Because that's traumatic to be the social worker running the thing, where day after day you got to get out of bed and to be the teacher and get out of bed and do the thing and put the kid on the device when you know it's violence. It's social violence, what we're doing. So it's going to destroy society if we don't figure it out. And this is just another quick graphic. It runs on poverty. This thing is fueled on poverty. They're going to want to pick the people who will look good on their dashboard. So if someone is really broken and they don't have much, they're not going to get picked. And if somebody is medium broken, but they're not going to get fixed very much, they would, and that's the grit narrative with Duckworth and resilience. They want to know the person who's pretty broken, but with minimal investment that you can zoom their numbers up. Because those are the people you want in your human capital portfolio for these impact investments. And we know how that works with charter schools and creaming and push out and all of that. We know how these games get played. So just so you know, I'm not making all this up. Like, here's our cast of characters. This is actually kind of fun to put together. So this goes back. I mean, these are the faces of the people behind the curtain, right? So Bill Drayton, he was the first social entrepreneur, and you hear all social entrepreneurs, but he was also part of the carbon emissions trading scheme. And really, in a sense, this human capital program is all based on a future cost offset. If we do something now, it will be less expensive than we wait to the future when it really goes wrong. And it's that sense. Like there's this carbon trading. If we front money now, we're gonna stave off this long-term expensive problem. And so these offsets are things like unemployment, incarceration, chronic illness, mental illness, addiction, all of these things. So Bill Drayton got it started, and he was founder of Ashoka, which is sort of the first social enterprise I think in the mid '80s. These folks, so this is Art Rolnick, who is the Minneapolis Fed head research economist, and Stephen Rothschild, who used to work for, I believe, General Mills, and then they created the outcomes-based government contract in the mid-90s. So I always thought it was Judith and Ronald, but it wasn't. They came first, and they did a program to put at re-entry. It was a re-entry program for underemployed men. But they set up in Minneapolis the outcomes-based system. So it's really interesting. This is the mid-90s. This is the same time that the charter school came out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, same time. So this idea of human capital tracking has been since the mid-90s. The idea of the charters are the incubators for both disruption and gentrification and dirty contracts, but they're also about training up these human capital and data collection systems and incubating blended learning, and even within KIP, these sort of regimented disciplinary models of education came out of the charters. So Harlem Children's Zone was the test bed. So again, long time. So Jeffrey Canada and Stanley Druckenmiller, who was George Soros's, one of his hedge fund managers, together they shorted the British pound. They earned $1 billion in one day. So when people are like, oh, George Soros, I'm like, there's no moral billionaires. Maybe you could be a millionaire, 10 million. Once you're a billionaire, you can't really be a moral individual and be sitting on $1 billion. So Stanley and Jeffrey went to Bowdoin. They got funded on the whole wraparound service program by the Robin Hood Foundation. Now this is where our history gets interesting. So the Robin Hood Foundation is backed by Paul Tudor Jones. Tudor Investments, and he's a hedge fund, so all the hedge funds are in on all of this stuff because it's the gambling game. And Paul Tudor Jones, besides being one of the big hedge fund managers, he got his start in cotton futures. Okay? I just want you to think that in a little bit. Okay? Cotton futures. That was his thing. Okay? He came out of Tennessee. So a ton of this stuff is happening in Memphis and Nashville through the community schools program and Lamar Alexander and Al Gore. So he's a New York guy now, but he's feeding, and over time, the Robin Hood Foundation came up with a book, a 160-page book of equations, a cost-benefit analysis equations on if you do things for poor families, what is the payoff? If you give a poor kid glasses, what's the payoff? If you treat their mom's addiction, what's the payoff? And they quantified it, and they put a number to all of it. And now it's ready to scale. It's ready to scale after all these years. So, so this is my buddy Judith. She was the former president of Penn. So this is because Wharton brought a whole lot of this stuff. It's like Wharton and Stanford and Harvard and MIT, but Wharton is they're cooking up the innovative finance. And a lot of what I'm trying to immerse myself now is understanding domestic finance, the financial mechanism of the domestic slave trade and the complicity of the North in the financialization of that process, and looking at how those mechanisms run, because I think it is self-replicating, this idea of differences of payment systems, which is what blockchain will bring together. But so Judith left Penn, she went to the Rockefeller Foundation, she created the Global Impact Investment Network, GIAN, right in the lead up to the housing crash. So this was all set up. And in many ways, the housing crash created the disruption that's going to seed this new market, right? After a decade of people losing homes, losing steady work, not being able to get back, now they're impact commodities. They're being set up for these impact commodities. So Bloomberg is the data-driven government guy, okay, sort of. So this is George Overholzer. It's actually his mugshot, I thought that was appropriate. And this is Trip Jones. So this is Third Sector and Mentor Network and New Profit. But so they remade the nonprofit sector over the past decade plus into data-driven nonprofits. And that was done with Hewlett-Packard money. And they have a whole division of Hewlett-Packard, William and Flora Hewlett Foundation grants, specifically for effective philanthropy. So they've remade the nonprofit sector to run these deals because that's part of the game. And then Ronald Cohen is the guy from the UK. So the first social impact bond was Peterborough Prison in 2008. He is a Harvard MBA, though. So he's in UK, but he's Harvard MBA. I believe his wife is Israeli. His family left Egypt and immigrated in the 50s to the UK. So he has actually social finance in the UK, social finance in the United States, social finance in Israel. Okay, so actually Bloomberg just got a new start with change agent government stuff going on in Israel now. So there's definitely ties, and also Penn has ties. So there are these finance technology control mechanisms going on. So there's something called Ridge Lane, and I don't know that I'll have time to talk about it, but Ridge Lane LP, Tom Ridge, our former Pennsylvania governor, first director of Homeland Security, and R. Brad Lane, who I'm not really sure what he does. He now has like an appointment at Stanford in some sort of neuroscience, I think educational neuroscience, which is super creepy. But they're the public-private partnership people, and they have 4 divisions: real estate, sustainability, IT, and education. And so the 8 education advisors, Paul LeBlanc of SNHU is doing blockchain certification, but Michael Crow is one of those 8, and he's with ASU, and they're working both. He was the founding board chair of InQtel, which is the CIA's venture capital arm, and Arizona State is very much about all of the EdTech, the ASU, GSV, Global Silicon Valley. So it's both militarized technology and very tight with New America. And then, so they're Tom Ridge, and then this is Emmett Carson, who essentially oversaw the creation of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, which is the slush fund for all of the tech billionaires, and is the largest community foundation in the country, second only to, is it Oklahoma? Tulsa Community Foundation. So all of this is being run through the community foundations, as well as other things. So he actually had to step down and leave. He is not, but he was the person, and guess what? He came out of Minneapolis, St. Paul. So this is where it even gets more interesting. This is another one of my big maps. So when I was looking at something for Dallas, this guy was part of this Harvard Divinity Community Economic Development. I'm like, I have to go back and look at 1,000 Points of Light. Like, I've done this map, it was just one corner of the map. I'm like, I got to go look at 1,000 Points of Light again, because essentially there was this President Summit for the Youth, the America's Future in the Youth, in Philadelphia, where I live. I wasn't there then, in 1997. And it was a concept of George Romney, who was Mitt's dad, who died. He was the former governor of Michigan and LDS. And so our Pennsylvania Democratic Senator Harris Wofford led it off, and he set up this thing with the 1,000 Points of Light. So it turns out the first directive 1,000 Points of Light, his name is Robert Goodwin, and his family ran the Oklahoma Eagle, and he's from Tulsa. Okay, yeah. So he's no longer it, but he started it. He was the Democrats for Bush. So again, we're fully bipartisan, but faith, right? We're going to have community and faith providers part of this. So 1,000 Points of Light teamed up. It turns out Wofford's son David was working with the Department of Education as all of the data-driven school stuff was coming online in the mid-90s. So Goals 2000, Improving America's Schools Act, and the Workforce Aligned Education. So his son was all part of that. And then the other piece is the alliance that worked on that included the United Way. This is all running through United Way. The Boys and Girls Club. They're doing after school. Now they're already doing 4-day-a-week. Many districts are saying they're underfunded, so they can only operate 4 days a week. Where do the kids go on the 5th day? They go to the Boys and Girls Club. The Boys and Girls Club is connected with Khan Academy, My Future Badging, Walt Disney content, Black Panther STEM curriculum, and the PTA is in on all of this, and Comcast. So essentially they're going to pull these kids out of traditional school systems into these private partnerships with no oversight and feed them digital media content and probably be overseen by AmeriCorps kids. So community and schools is the community school piece, and I don't know that I'm going to get around to that, but the community schools are this big hub. Mentor Network, which was Trip Jones' private foster care. A bunch of kids died, okay? So when we talk about predictive profiling, wraparound services, we have to understand is are these compulsory? And if parents refuse interventions that are pushed on them that might be driven by the financial underpinnings of impact investors and nonprofit providers, if they refuse, will they come under question by Child Protective Services? Are they a good parent, right? Like, here our school has told you this program for your kid needs, and if you don't sign up for this program, maybe we should start looking at you closer. Maybe you're not a good parent to your kids. And then we're driving the foster system. Corporation for National Community Service housed the Social Innovation Fund, which was the incubator for all of the Pay for Success money. And that has ties to Jim Sorensen and the Mormon money over there. So out of the summit came America's Promise, the America's Promise Alliance. Out of that came Ready Nation, and out of Ready Nation came the Human Capital Pre-K bonds. So it's this direct connection. So we have to understand when we're talking public-private partnerships of social services, they're going to be faith-based, a lot of them. And we have to understand that what they are tracking is behavior, right? And they're automating it, and they're linking it to profiling. So, like, I'm not a person of a specific organized religion. I do have a feeling of spirituality and that this is an epic battle of good and evil. But what happens if you fall in and they're like, I'm sorry, you're of no faith, or you're this faith. The only options we have for you, you only have the this option of faith, and it's not yours, but like you're going to be graded on your behavior according to that compliance. And even for someone who's very religious, I would say, like, is that what we're doing? Are we going to do that? And are you going to buy into this system of data-driven information sharing on the people you're serving? And will you see this as a business opportunity to grow your endowment, like your religious funds, off the backs of these people? Or are you really doing liberatory faith-based work? And it's a big question, because I have to say, what most people are not aware is that the Poor People's Campaign, which is very broadly organized and has a big faith-based component, is being funded largely through the Ford Foundation, which has $1 billion set aside for impact investing. Okay, so they're growing this market, and there are many very well-intentioned people who understand the need to address poverty, who are being brought along without any understanding of any of these pieces. And I think if they knew, we would stop and question more what exactly is happening. But
why is Oral Roberts in there and not like Harvard or MIT?
Harvard's behind all of it. Harvard Kennedy School set up all the policy. Like, I have actually, I don't know, one of the handouts sort of shows the geography of some of these things, but it's a mix. The thing that's interesting about Oral Roberts, largely, honestly, is their telepresence. I find really interesting. They've made a big investment in distance learning and telepresence, like having these robots on sticks with iPads. And I think their vision is globally platformed education delivery with a faith-based overlay. And so if we're thinking about global markets in education, they're looking to project their brand globally outside the US. But just as if we move to a blockchain credentialing system, which something that has already been set up is called the University Learning Store, which is these badges. And I can't remember the 6 universities, but they're like flagship state institutions. I think Madison is one, and UC Irvine might be one. But that you can mix and match a la carte online courses towards, they're not even calling them degrees anymore. So you can just start earning badges. But as much as you could do that domestically, you could be earning badges globally. And again, I'm not saying this from a nationalist standpoint, but from a labor and market standpoint, once the bottom drops out on that, like, and it's all distance learning and also signals intelligence, because we have to understand signals intelligence, like, it's going to get really messy. So, okay. So anyway, these are the cost offsets. I just pulled a little bit of a Minority Report in there, because I think that they've been setting us up for a while. This is just a picture of from the Robin Hood Book of Equations. And this is Paul Tudor Jones. Like, doesn't this just shout America to you? This is the cotton futures trader guy. And so he brings in Oprah and Bill Gates and everyone, and they all come to his galas. And like, when I go up to New York, I take the bus up, and the bus stop is across from the Javits Center. So that's where they have all their big galas. And he's the hedge fund guy. Everybody wants to be with him in the hedge fund club and go to his galas. And that's why the hedge funds are into this, because it is a game of gambling. And so there are all of these cost offset equations. The biggest one to keep in mind, like the most robustly developed one that I hear, is about universal pre-K, and that's where EduCare comes in. So Jim Heckman is an esteemed economist in early childhood human capital, University of Chicago. All right, so Chicago boys. Interestingly, his whole human capital economic opportunity group is funded by Open Society. So when people are like, oh, I'm like, no, George Soros is funding the Becker-Friedman School of Economics. Like, there's no, all of the things they want you to believe, how things are broken out and separate, they're not. They're all just working on this game plan. So Heckman, J.B. Pritzker, who's the current governor of Illinois, funded, before he was governor, Heckman's research and a toolkit that said, guess what? If we invest in quality universal pre-K, we'll guarantee you a 7 to 10% rate of return on that annually, which is not bad for a community foundation, right? And if you add health impact data, we can bump it to 13, all right? So that's a smart playground for you, and some Fitbits, right? And some Wii games. Like, that's what they're like, we're gonna get that data on those pre-K kids. And the crazy thing about Heckman is, so he needs a number that moves on a dashboard, because it's all like, has to move for this contracting system to work. And he said, so, well, IQ doesn't really work, because he's presenting with J.B. Pritzker at this, they went up and down California to all the community foundations pitching this. And he's like, because it kind of hardens up, like around age 9 or 10, like it doesn't move that much. We can move character. We can move character, and we can move it digitally. If we can get that data, that's going to be our target of opportunity. So much deeper understanding, and when we go in, we look at what the economic and social benefits are of these interventions. So they're looking at cognitive and non-cognitive, but really what they can move is non-cognitive. And they're going to do it with gamification. So that's what the PBS Kids apps are about. That's why we're having little kids on games. And that's why you have Daniel Tiger's Tea Party that says, are you sharing your cookies? Are you sharing? Maybe you should share, right? We know that you're not sharing. And then it goes in your permanent blockchain record that when you were 2.5 on the video app, you didn't share. And maybe it sounds funny, but if it's somebody's Paul Tudor Jones's hedge fund deal that you moved from a 3 to a 4.7, there's consequences to that. And I went to a meeting of communications folks, nonprofit media in Philadelphia, and I sat at a table with the head of communications of our NPR station, who was a black woman in her 60s, and I said, listen, I've watched these videos. This is not going to go well. This is really dangerous. This Daniel Tea Party stuff, you guys shouldn't be doing this. And because this room was full of people who are also doing military consulting. And they were saying, well, we'll invest in pre-K so these kids can drive our tanks. That's why, past the ASVAB, that's why we invest in pre-K, so we can have kids feed them to the military. And I said, that's not okay. And she looked at me and she said, well, we all take the money. What do you want me to do? We all take the money. I built my career on Ford Foundation grants. And so that's why the press isn't going to save us, because they're all part of Solutions Journalism Network, and y'all have that here. The role of the press, other than independent people, is to say, look at how terrible poverty is. Look, it's terrible. And it is terrible. They're setting up this solution. And they know it, and they take the money. So, and it's not just the Heckman equation. So there's a bunch of different ones. This is Columbia Teachers College. They did an 11% on social emotional learning. So that's related. So again, Ivy League stamp, pachoom, Columbia Teachers College. This is on depression. This is in the UK, Laird, and Richard Laird. And they scaled the NHS mental health, but it was CBT, online digital therapy, and they had drop-in happiness centers. And it was called IKEA of the mind. And that's what they did there. And they scaled it. They scaled their mental health on that equation. This is one that I'm looking at now on prison education, because the prison population is going to be a captive, so to speak, market for EdTech. And they've set up for the Second Chance Pell Grant to say there's a cost offset on prison education. Do I believe that people who are in that circumstance should have access? I totally do. Do I think they should be data mined and particularly profiled based on that? I absolutely don't.
What's a cost offset?
So this idea that you would predictively profile the cost of a depressed person in unemployment. And there's a number.
Right.
And it looks like something like that. And they say, based on your profile, like you were saying, in the aggregate, it seems like you would be a social burden
Right.
based on your, and they're
Yeah.
even doing this in utero, in the home visits. Your zip code, your parents' educational attainment, and I think genomics will be a part of it. I think there's a
Yeah.
eugenics agenda layered into that because the model of this was Data Zone in San Jose, again, part of that Santa Clara. It was NSF funding that created these vast data lakes of like pre-K data, juvenile delinquency data, mental health data, foster care data. It all has to touch to legitimize that, like, because I gave you pre-K, you didn't end up addicted. If the addiction data lives totally separate from the pre-K data, they can't even fake
Right.
it. But if they kind of throw it all together, they can say,
Yeah.
I think we mixed it. And like, maybe you're never going to be addicted, but they say you were. And so in the virtual world, you already are, right? You've
So
been
the offset is
pre-card.
the difference between the expected cost for
And
me
yeah, and the intervention.
actual cost after the intervention.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And so what they do is like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, they'll say, here's our prediction of the larger amount, this is what our intervention costs, and here's the amount in between. We're just going to slice off this little bit in between as our profit. And that's how they're justifying it. So, and supportive housing is another big one. And then,
Gotcha.
But what about the cost of like a toxic work environment? I mean, come on, like
Oh, sorry.
surely there's got to be some sort of way to reverse that.
I think they poison the kids in Flint on purpose because lead is an impact metric.
And they still are.
They still are.
there.
But I think that once it's high enough, they'll start to fix it. Asthma is a cost offset. They're going to poison the air. They poison the air of the kids, and now they'll take it back down. And they'll say, no, but it's, we have lead in our schools. Right now it's playing out in other districts. We have a lead problem. And so they'll put a number on the lead, which is not to say anyone should have to work or live in a toxic environment, but they're financializing it for this system, not because it's the right thing to do.
Well, they're banking them. They're banking them in their problems. I'm going to create and make you depressed because in the future, then I'll be able to sell you drugs.
Yeah.
And you see it here, especially with the teacher impact studies. Like
Yeah, you were talking
traumatized
about the
teachers,
wellness or self-care.
Yeah. Well, it's OU Schusterman, they're doing like studies on pre-K teachers and how happy they are, and so you already see these impact studies on the teachers.
And there's two verticals. So the vertical of the profit is both the impact on the client, but they're also professionally developing the service provider. So the pre-K teachers, the social workers, the nurse practitioners, they will be developed and improved in themselves as impact metrics as well. So yeah, sorry.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So many questions.
Yeah.
I'll go with.
Physical challenge.
Okay, let's talk about it for a second, if you don't mind. So like potential ways to fight back,
Yeah.
right? So the one thing I'm thinking, so like a lot of times what I see is people who want to opt out of the tech,
Yeah.
right? Well, if we're looking at it with this framework, that's just traditional strike dynamics, right? We haven't seen those work very well recently in America, and
Right.
there's no foreseeable general strike coming. So I don't know. Basically, I'm just going to say I think that's a dead in the water tactic for the most part, other than like minor disruption. So what, like in your analysis of this situation, where is the point where you hit hardest? Like,
Blockchain identity.
okay, but
I think so.
yeah. Explain what you think about blockchain identity, because I see, so basically from my perspective, I see like the solutions in blockchain.
Yeah.
And so I want to see, or I'd like to hear about what you think the problem is there. Is it just the use of it, or is it the technology itself? Because like,
Would you put a baby on blockchain?
I mean, can I answer that truthfully?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. In the sense that I would put data on individuals on a distributed, anonymous, not controlled by corporate interests,
You know about Enigma?
Enigma.
Yeah, MIT's Enigma. They can query unencrypted data. So it won't be your personal data, but it will facilitate the impact investing. So essentially, it will protect you. So once you have blockchain identity as the model, you become a commodity. in a lot of the discussions right now around entrepreneurship and financial security and these things are trying to teach people in the gig economy is not that you're going to be an entrepreneur and start a small business or regional business or an app or do things. It's that you yourself are the commodity. So starting in pre-K, they're talking about building social capital. So you build a brand. Like honestly, I don't know like how much like somewhat like late start, radically left quilting, tech disrupting mom has like in the market, probably a limited interest area. So, and that you would start to build your brand before you even really understand what that means. Like like a baby would start to build their brand. Like they don't know, like they're not making informed choices about what their brand is. So that is what, it's the commodification of social relationships is I think what bothers me the most.
So, and I think we're getting close to like what my question should be,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
But I just gotta like explore this, to figure out where we're at, right?
Yeah.
So, I guess my response to that or whatever is like, what about the fact that like blockchains aren't like a singular entity, right? And like, kind of like these data sources, right? They're siloed, but then they want to connect them. But the thing is, like, we can make our own blockchains. You know what I mean? Like,
I think for me, the basis is the challenge, and this comes up with like the what works government and the big data government, is the problems in our society. We don't actually need more data to know what we're doing is wrong or to fix it. Like, I think there's this presumption that you would like us to believe, like, if we just had more data, like, we would know how to fix this problem. And I'm like, no, this problem is a power differential problem. It's a racial capitalism problem. It's a social problem. It's not that, like, if the right academic put the right database together, we would know how to fix it. Because that always leads to lean production austerity. Like, it's always working within their framework that we have to fit ourselves. Does that, like, so it's presuming that data is the answer, or that like a datafied world is the answer. And to me, and this isn't what everybody believes, but like my journey through this has been the answer, from my perspective, and I don't know, I'm not saying it's everybody's, is that we need to move towards a positionality of right relationships, which is an anti-colonial position, which is anti-capitalist position, because that is where we have landed. And looking at indigenous worldviews and alternative worldviews that center community and webs of authentic relationships as opposed to digitized virtual relationships is the antidote. And I don't know that I would see it in my lifetime, honestly. But like I feel like somebody needs to hold a spark that there is another worldview out there that is a non-blockchain worldview. And whether I can actually achieve it, I don't think I would achieve it in my lifetime. But like if I have to be the blockchain abolition lady for the moment, like that's what I feel called to do right now, at least in this moment.
I just need to ask a framing question.
Yeah.
Because I think I understand what you're getting at, and I'm not a coder, but I am a signal analyst. At one point in time I was a geophysicist.
Oh, great.
So, but what you're basically saying is your ethical issue with all of this is that when I think about what racism is, racism is extractive. It always has been. It's like mining, right? And so you're taking, by oppressing this group on the basis of some visible characteristic, right? So that is not curable. And so like what you're saying about having a broken people, you take a broken class and you hold it down and you extract from it for the purpose of making money. And so now, I mean, and then because of class breaks people at different levels. So it sounds like what you're saying then is they're sort of, instead of just solving that problem, right, which is a basic human ethical moral problems. You're saying that they're implying that they're resolving this problem by digitizing it all and saying, well, we can get these deltas, and then they're commodifying that and bundling that and selling it, into the marketplace, because they're just making a market out of the delta, right?
Okay,
But they're not really solving the problem. All they're really doing is still extracting.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And the other piece is, I believe, this is my other framing piece, is that a lot of times you'll hear, like, capitalism, it's hit the wall, like, it cannot hold, it's jumped into the virtual world already, like with the virtual economies and virtual property rights, and that is what blockchain is essentially. And I truly believe that the next settler colonial frontier is augmented reality. So we had, you know, the interior colonial frontier and the territories and the taking of all of those land and resources and people's labor, and then we had the imperial moment, and now the next layer is, it will look like the real world, but there is a layer over it of coded data, and that broadband and 5G is the next transcontinental railroad, and the harm that was done through the steel and the coal mines and the lumber to build this infrastructure with a corporate state and a militarization protection of these infrastructure connectivities, that broadband and 5G is that next thing. And it will look like, it won't look like, that's the thing that's hard for me, is that I'm almost already living in the augmented reality world, and I can see the things that other people can't see. But soon, everyone, I mean, if they accomplish this, will be able to say, like, oh, I have my glasses. I know where this was made. I know if it was made with, you know, sustainable wood. I know when they bought it, what they, you know, it's these layers of data. And there are, we talked about it today, they're doing smart policing, and Deloitte is talking about augmented reality policing, where they have augmented reality glasses, and they can look at your house and know about you. And that is already possible. So what does it look like to live in a world built with this deep, brutal history of racial capitalism and then layer that in? I don't think we're getting out, we're just doubling down. And it's being framed as liberation, and I do not believe, because if it were liberation, it would be that people would be in the streets demanding it. And if Yang and all these folks are here saying, here, we just had like to set you up with a little UBI, like, that's not real. That's a trap. Like, because if it were real, it would be on the demands of the people, and the people don't know to demand it yet. Anyway, that's just my,
So I wanted to try and provide maybe a synthesis, kind of forward to talking about thesis, antithesis, and I think, so let's go off what Branson was saying about how do we respond to this. If we're simply to opt out, it's like a strike action. You could, in theory, organize a general strike. We could, in theory, unify the class and opt out, and work stoppages there. But we've seen with limitations that we are not conscious. We're not organized at that point there. So there's challenges there. That's still an option on the table. It's something we can aim towards. But I look to history, and I look, what I would compare this most to is like the Luddite movement, wherein that was an element of capitalism, advanced by technological development, with the enclosures, with the Industrial Revolution, and the response of people in resistance was to smash the factories, to try and wrench in the gears, right? And there's inspiration to take from that, in acts of civil disobedience and bringing attention. But ultimately, I don't think that approach will work if we are really trying to create, to shape the new world coming forward. Because what I see, and this is what I see in every conversation I have with people about this, is they're ultimately, it's like Pandora's box. It's already opened. We have the blockchains out, the technology's out. It's already in our schools. What I take away is what we need to start really thinking about and building is we need to build the alternative model. You mentioned something earlier, like parallel, like a parallel economy. And I think that's not like this, not necessarily like opting out, building, all this stuff necessarily, but like building structures and models for schooling. Because here's the deal. We're just here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're not at the center of capital like New York City. We have limits of what, we do have the center of the universe. That's
they
right.
want the proof of concept.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm
they
saying.
want the proof. And you guys are the intersection of all of these pieces.
Because here's, when I look at what these people are doing, it's not a single cabal. It's a bunch of people competing to be the next best thing. Right. So we don't need to necessarily be competing for the same reasons, but we need to build what our alternative. Because what I see constantly is the rejoinder. This, especially when we were working on with the support staff with Sodexo and stuff. The rejoinders, well, what do you suggest we do instead? What's your plan? What is your step-by-step strategic plan to, let's say, because we were talking about getting Sodexo out of schools and returning it back to public schools. So what's your plan to do that in a way with the little, gender? One thing we do, we have to change the whole narrative around it. That's unfair, but we genuinely need to say, no, this is what we can do. We need to show it. We need to prove it can work with the parameters we have. and we need to organize it in a way that is according to, like, for me as a socialist, you know, like equity, like, you know, anti-colonial, like what you're talking about too with the, you know, right relationships. That's what we're talking about. And I think it happens at a municipal level to start. It starts here, like in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We can use, for the same reasons that they're using poverty and disaster as a starting point to get their ideology across to restructure society, the opportunity for us to restructure society is in resistance to it. Because
I think a prefigurative, like a prefigurative space, a space that is based in like mutual aid, like and you're right. It can happen because it's going to be hard to totally extract. You can't just like walk away from the thing because it is all we live.
We can build dual power both in the parallel and also in engaging. Like for me, so I made the decision very recently. I'm going back to school. And a lot of this was an inspiration to it. Originally, I was thinking I'm going to go back into rank and file teacher, but I've kind of shifted gears and I've looked at option of going into urban and regional planning and looking at the municipal structure and like using all of these like structures they've built and like, you know, there's like what we need to be doing is entering. Like you mentioned a lot of like, you know, academics, like, and it's also true for activists, frankly. Yeah. Like this is the thing for me. Like I've been an activist, you know, for 5 years now, doing this like after extracurricular work. You know, is kind of what it is. It's after I do my job. It's separate from, you know, what I'm doing economically. We have to reorient ourselves such that the work we're entering in, like the workplaces, when we're entering those spaces, we're organizing in those spaces and we're orienting them to the world we want to see. Because unfortunately, the opportunity, for me, because between climate change and like capitalism, I think the opportunity window is very small.
Can I speak to that?
Yes.
So my other job, and I don't want to say exactly, but I work in an urban botanic garden, okay? And I'm the membership person, and so part of this, because this also touches healthcare and preventative healthcare, and in UK it's called social prescribing, which sounds really nice, like, oh, you look a little depressed, I think maybe you should go for a walk every once in a while in the park. And you're like, here, let me write you a prescription for that, haha. But like then they do, and then they're like, check in with your phone on the QR code, and I know how often you walked and where you walked and what your pulse rate was. And then when you come back for your checkup, I'll know what quality of care to give you or what you've earned based on how compliant you have been with what I've given. So I work, it's a public park system site, and I said, you know, in our world, the augmented reality world could come real quick and they come up to us and say, wouldn't you like to be part of our community care continuum preferred providers nature center? Like, we would love to have you because look, you're in a low-income urban community with all these environmental issues, and we love people to have wellness. And like, could you just put this QR code on your sign on either end of your walking trail? And like, if I wasn't talking every day to my friends at work, we can't do that. When the kids come to work in the urban farm, we can't give them badges for behavior. Like, when that day comes, I mean, it's going to be hard. I'm going to either have to make some hard decisions, but I keep saying, we're next to a housing project that is going to be a new HUD choice neighborhood. They're going to smart that thing up with a bunch of bullet sensors and smart light poles and all kind of stuff. And like, we have to, and it's sad because we're a city of violence, so people, their first instinct is, give me more surveillance. Right. I need some, and I'm like, we need to have a more robust conversation because what they're doing is, they're setting y'all up. So how do we collaborate? And I think that's my struggle, being, you know, a white woman with the privilege of this time, to know this stuff and not to say, I know what you should do about this. Like, let me tell you what to do, is just to say, I've synthesized this. This is my understanding. I believe people who are setting up like resistance strategies should know so you can be informed. And if you would like for me to be part of the conversation, I'm happy to share what I know and what I think. But people, I'll say this and they'll say, so what's the answer? And I said, I'm the white lady, I'm part of the problem. Like, I'm not, I came from this problem. And so that means I can understand this. I mean, it scares me that my head can be like, oh, okay, they're asking SSI, that's because they're setting up the Australian Welfare Benefits Program on token economics for disability payments. Like, I can make that connection. I don't exactly know how to fix it, but I think prefigurative, and like, so I'm organizing, it's the last worksheet underneath there, is with the Poor People's Economic and Human Rights Campaign. If you know Sherry Honkala, she's been a housing activist for many, many years in Kensington, and she ran for vice president of the Green Party with Jill Stein a couple times ago. She's based in Philly. Our kids went to the same school. We were an opt-out together, but and she's poor. I mean, she drives Instacart, and she was salting in with the UPS and doing hard labor work in these warehouses. So, like, I know about a lot of the things I know about, like Obama phones and the benefit systems, because I'm with folks who I respect greatly and who have different sets of knowledges than I have. And it's in our collaboration. So one of the things I'm trying to do with my friend Meg is, like, we're talking about doing a radical quilting program where we're going to do like guerrilla art, handwork, and soup. And in our small prefigurative hopeful space, because you need to make time for that hopeful part, is to like build the real world relationships that will sustain this work over time.
And to expand on that, what you were saying earlier, like, coming in that space, I think we need to go to where the work's already being done in communities and like bring whatever our analysis is and have those conversations. And when building like networks of mutual aid, it has to go beyond, kind of charity models. It has to go to like what we're actually building people's capacity and relationships with each other. And I think it has to have a policy element as well, like where we're creating a model that can be replicated, that we can like have, a toolbox and like actively going out of our way to support people in a way that can be sustained where they're at, and whatever their realities are, working with them, having people who are specifically organizers to go into a place and say, I'm here to help you realize what your vision is. Here's the model that we've built. If you want to come with it, here's how to do it, but you can also put your own spin on it. You keep that sort of like collaborative space, prefigurative. But I really think that's the next step, because I think where I see a lot of, because leftists, a lot of anarchists, like I've been in a lot of mutual aid working spaces, it tends to be along this kind of very, I wouldn't say narrow, but it's the serve the people model more than necessarily actually building a new parallel space.
You have to build, you have to build it. And I mean, the thing is that I think there are still significant challenges that have to be mounted even if they can't happen. Like, we're having AI policing. And I was in, a couple years back, a meeting in Philadelphia as part of the International Police Superintendents Association, and it was a public meeting at a place that our city open data program was used to develop predictive policing software that was underwritten by the NSF, right? So the NSF underwrote a guy working with the Philadelphia Police Department who was doing GIS to then spin off a for-profit company that then he sold that predictive policing software not only back to our city, but East St. Louis and Chicago and all of these other cities to be weaponized against us with our open data, with our public tax dollars. And now in that meeting at the end, a guy raised his hand, and it turns out he was the CIO of the city at the time, and he said they were trying to really downplay it, but he said the future policing is predictive analytics, facial recognition software, and drones, right? And this was like 3 years ago, and it's coming. They're flying the drones around. So at some point, like, we have to build a space. But like, I keep thinking Marinage, right? I'm like, where's the Dismal Swamp? Like, is that what do we do about the drones? Because at Penn, they're building hive mind drones for the Army, right? Right up the river from where I work. So where do we get the river? Yeah. I'm sorry, I lost track of time, so I'm not.
No, that's okay. But they're doing that here. They have NSF grant money to build those drones here.
Can I just say one quick thing just to close it on about the blockchain stuff? So the blockchain badging systems, so again, this feeds into the AI global platform labor, is that what they want is they're engineering the workforce systems to ONET, which is a workforce labor database in Raleigh. So every job has a list of skills. And so they want to have these badges aligned to the skills so that they can scale it and say, here's a job, it's automated, do you have the skills? And it sorts, and then maybe you get an AI facial recognition interview or something like that. But it's not just going to be you in Tulsa, it's going to be you competing against someone in the Philippines and Bolivia, like anyone. It's an open platform. So are you a graphic designer? Like, the world is your market. And all of the stuff that can be done in a cloud-based system is going to be a free market global thing. So the more we feed the badging, especially also the behaviors, I just feel like on the left, and I keep sort of asking people, like, are we doing like blockchain socialism? Like, is that, like, in Philly, like, they don't even answer me. And I'm like, because we need to talk about it. Like, I don't want to do blockchain socialism, but like, is that what you're thinking? And they don't even know enough to think about it. Like, maybe you're thinking that, but I'm like, it's not my thing. Like, maybe I'm more of like a collectivist anarchist or something at this point. I'm like,
there's a whole lot of communities around it, though.
Yeah,
Sure.
so-
And I'll say a lot of the people are the same people who make, who are forced to make. They don't want to, but they feel stuck. Like, they're the people who are tasked with making the decisions at Google. The decisions are made, but these are the people who, like, the actual coders and stuff.
But that's what I'm like, could we make them not code it? Like, could we figure out some way not to make the augmented reality world? Like, it isn't fully blown. Like, could we just, but the thing is, I believe, and this is also part of the settler colonial sort of framing, is it won't be built with fully paid labor. It will have to be built with unfree labor, and that unfree labor will be incarcerated people, and it will be refugees, and it will be high school kids, and it will be unhoused people, and it will be very basic coding, like the training data stuff. Like, here's your tablet, refugee, while you're sitting in the tent, clean up this data for the autonomous vehicles. And it's like, people sell it as like STEM careers, but it's not going to be that. That's frontier. That world can't be built at full price. And so, like, again, if we don't code it, it's both the full paid coding community, but it's also going to be, how do we stand in solidarity with people who are doing forced labor in prisons to say, like, we're going to protect them from not having to code it either.
It's not just simple code either. It's already happened in here because we have a Oklahoma organization here. We built a system to update people when their court dates are, so because we have such a...
The Uptrust?
No.
Oh,
it's
another one?
actually Uptrust took our stuff, our source code, and then sold it back to the city of Tulsa.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and so they're...
I went to go to their office in Northampton.
Right,
I'm
so...
like, I got to go see this place. Yeah.
Right, so they took our code bases, and they sold it back to the city of Tulsa at a fee of like $10,000. So to say that it's like people doing simple code, it's not. It's people actually, like, good intentioned people, like, putting together technology.
Doing all the work and then
But what I'm
somebody
saying
else
is that's
does
an
it.
impact market. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, up like that code appearance. So I will tell you a weird, like, just from a personal standpoint. So I got arrested this May, not on purpose. Ending up, like, I was with folks who were protesting our housing authority. And they staged a multiple day occupation of our housing authority space. And I was out there a couple nights, but like I was feeding them like a couple times a week when I could. And I went to go get my pots and pans back. So I only had a certain number of big pots and pans. And I just showed up, and they were fencing the lot, the housing authority police. And my friends had been trying to stop them from, it was illegal fencing. There was an 8-foot high fence that was illegal zoning. And I was like, where's your variance? And And it ended up, like they were shoving us, and it wasn't meant to be that. But so the guy who was there, who's a young black guy out of like foster care, they had him in a chokehold. And I turned around and I saw this happening, and I was like, oh my God, you know. And I just like was trying to pull it, like stop, like that you know, it didn't. It was someone who was like in a t-shirt, and I turned around because someone was filming it, and I was explaining it, and I looked, and I'm like, oh my God. And then it became this, and it was raining sideways, and I didn't have my camera. And then afterwards, like I was trying to witness and like intervene and stop, and then all the police came, and so I was filming, and I was like, are you a police officer to this person out? I'm like, are you a police officer? What's your badge number? Like I was really, because they had hurt him. And then I went to document the fence, and they threw me on the ground. And they put me in the Philly roundhouse for 20 hours and put 5 misdemeanors. They tried to put felony on me, but they didn't. And so that was my field work in seeing how this works. And I'm not saying there are many people who have done far, far worse situations. But it gave me a window into how the system operates, how the tech operates. So I spent the next 5 months trying to process through these court systems. And at one point, they were going to put me in these diversion courts, and that's why it's really important to read my piece about diversion courts incarcerating the world. And it didn't go into diversion, but someone had erroneously entered that date in. And it got picked up in the system. And maybe it got deleted out, but there was a ghost in the system. And so I kept getting text messages to come, and my subpoena was a different date. And I would call, and I would say, my subpoena, my paperwork says this date. And I didn't want to not go and have some bench warrant out on me. And so I'd show up in the room, and my name's not on the door. And like, go to the second floor. And it was like Kafka, right? And I'm like, what? And I'm like, well, could you please just sign my paper that I came today? So like at some point, if, we don't sign that. I'm like, well, I'm going to take a picture of your photocopier so at least my metadata shows I was in this building. And that's that's the text messaging system. So these are these systems that may be built with good intentions, and Uptrust is about connecting people with social services, which is that loop.
Right.
So I wouldn't have known all those things had I not seen it, but that's why I was able to write that piece, because I lived those glitches of technology systems that, had they been human beings who had it was a human intervention, they could have stopped it. The tech wouldn't stop.
I was so interested in what you were saying about, like the shaping of behavior in children, in small children. I have the opportunity to often interpret in Spanish language interpreting in some of the poorest schools here in Tulsa, working with immigrant families. And I'm always struck about, I go to these parent-teacher conferences and I'm interpreting for the teacher and the parent, and how much emphasis there is just on, the behavior of the children. It is really so, there's been there's no content anymore. There's no measurement of, or emphasis on ideas, on really teaching ideas and concepts. It comes down to these behaviors, and of the poorest of the people too, and it's, I'm almost embarrassed to have to translate to people who are coming, moms that are wanting to understand, and they really want to know, what is my child learning, and instead the teachers are overworked, and I hear their point of view too, but it really comes down to, it's almost like this, almost like a corny, weird kind of like, oh, I love your daughter, it's very patronizing at the same time that they're reinforcing the need to conduct yourself or comport yourself in a certain way. What's happening in the schools is just really horrible. It's and then of course it only comes down to how well they test, and then these behavior metrics. But just really divorced of content and ideas, and it's a dumbing down of our children, but also at the same time collecting all this data on them.
Well, in the behaviors, they're creating classroom environments that lead children to be stressed out, right? And then they penalize them for acting out because they're on devices, they don't have the social interactions, they're expected to have this rigid discipline, and it's not developmentally appropriate, and then you're like, see, you're badly behaved, you're a problem. So, well, let me just see the last. I just want to just to hit. So Union High School is doing these blockchain transcripts. I just want to make sure you guys understand that. And I think when you talk about I think there are points at which someone having an education, what does it mean to have a blockchain transcript? Can you opt out of the blockchain? What are the implications? Who controls the data in that? Is that a perpetual access point? Like you have a high school transcript and you have it set up, and that when you're 30, you're still tapping into your blockchain. How really does all of this work? Because they were connected to Learning Machine, the block certs, I believe. Dallas has a program now with Greenlight credentials, and that's from this guy was from Tata Interactive. So this is the this is the MIT one, but someone should be talking to people at this high school saying hey, before we sign all these kids up on blockchain, could we have a bigger conversation about what this is? Because I don't think I know you're selling us on the convenience of having this at our fingertips on our phone, but the implications are broader than this. And in Dallas, the framing was, this blockchain transcript will help you tell your whole story. And if you understand that mastery transcript of behaviors, the whole story means your behaviors. They want everything on the blockchain. And then, so Paul LeBlanc has this, did the SNHU pilot. It's global. The EU is talking about single data markets. So really they are talking about harmonized digital citizenship and data markets. It is really about these commodities. And in the EU, this is the 2017 blockchain report. They're talking about using the education vouchers. So that's the thing we have to understand about the impact metrics, is that once you're bouncing around the learning ecosystem with the device, they're going to want to know which educational program has the most impact on you. And they're going to get paid back. So a lot of the conversations now about teacher pay and performance pay, they're not really about the teachers. It's going to be about the computer programs when the teachers are fully marginalized. So they're going to be able to pay for the better computer program if it has better impact. And that's where that language is going. it's not really, it's about the teachers for now, but the long game is they want a performance bonus on the education programs. So this is from the Heritage Foundation. So they're already talking about this. Again, it's fully bipartisan, but they're already envisioning ESAs being linked to digital payment and mobile money systems. And again, in this lifelong learning context, you're starting in utero with some like, belly listening music device intervention, like all the way up to your like geriatric, and you're still like coding in your senior citizen home. Like that's the lifelong learning. So these vouchers and performance metrics are going to go on. And this is a really important image. I don't know if you guys can see it, but this hasn't happened, but this is the theorizing from the Illinois Blockchain Task Force, and this is their headspace about digital nudges and coding, is that they're talking about putting SNAP on blockchain and how you can manipulate choice theory. So you've got an individual, so the welfare applicant, they have a benefit wallet. So this is SNAP, but this benefit wallet could be layered with your housing, healthcare, education, everything in there. If you make the right choice at the store, the Apple, it will ding you back money. And if you make the wrong choice, it's full price. And this, you're like, well, that's good. If it's always nice to get money back until the allocation is such that if you only can make it to the end of the month, if you always make the right choice. And the right choice may be impossible because you live in a food desert, you work 3 shifts, your gas is cut off, da-da-da-da-da. Like there may be many reasons you cannot make the right choice every time. So imagine this with an education voucher. And I'm saying that from either side, right? Imagine you're incentivizing for the evidence-based education module, right? It's like, well, if you use Achieve 3000, it's evidence-based. You will put extra, maybe if you save up all year, you can have some hippotherapy. That's the mindset. But, you want the Black Panther module? That's an upcharge. That version. You want some more radical stuff? That's going to cost you. That's not really approved. So, or that's not in the code, so there are various ways that people who are coding these systems will code the existing structure into it. And that's, again, the blockchain piece is maybe the blockchain in and of itself isn't, but it enables all of these systems to happen that further, I think, reinforce the power inequities. And this is kind of just the last thing, but this is this is a little complicated, but what this might look like. So you have a digital identity. So you've got these vouchers, you've got data, you've got payments, and these smart contracts. So it's increasingly automated. So you may not even be able to control how these automated systems work. It's just you do the thing, it's in your learning locker, the payment goes over, and something bad goes wrong, and you can't even get anybody on the phone or on your Snapchat, your chat box. These vouchers could go to work-based learning. So the work-based learning I have lots of concerns about. That's the big picture model. They're looking at 2 days a week out of class time. So we're pushing 14-year-olds into work-based learning. So initially my concern was well, what does that look like? Well, one, why should a 14-year-old be giving free labor to companies? But two, well, what does that look like when you're a young black kid in a city with racist policing and they're navigating this in their work? What does that set them up for? But then there's also well, what does that set up given the Epstein case and grooming and trafficking of kids? Who's protecting these kids when they're out in this learning everywhere situation? We haven't been very good at protecting kids, especially black and brown kids and indigenous kids. We just haven't. You could get your voucher on your online learning, your gamification and your augmented reality. You're a little depressed, well, you can use your payment and for your teletherapy. Well, maybe you're housing insecure, well, for your supportive housing voucher. So all this data is bouncing back and forth, and all of these are different impact opportunities for securitization. And then all of this information on the back end through Enigma, maybe not individually, but in aggregate, can be used on larger risk profiling. And that's the thing I'm trying to convey, is that this future of unrest, whether it be economic unrest, social unrest, environmental unrest, I think the folks in Davos realize the next 20 years there's about to be a lot of unrest. And so how do those who have the power, manage these systems in such a way to their benefit, both from a control standpoint and a profit standpoint? So that's that's it. Oh, so here's my last little thing. So this is my one little positive. So resolution opposing blockchain identity systems, linking them to public benefits. So we developed last spring, my colleague and I, who sits on the, she's the education chair of the San Jose NAACP, took to the state of California 2 resolutions. One was against pay for success finance, and one was against blockchain identity, linking it to public benefit systems. And both passed at the state level. I believe it was maybe California and Hawaii. They were together. And then the blockchain one actually went to the national meeting in July in Detroit. And there were individuals who were connected to New York, EdTech interests, who tried to gut that resolution because it would hurt their business model because they'd cut a side deal with some folks. But in this big room of several thousand people, all but that small little group, they did not successfully gut the bill and the resolution, and it passed with unanimous, except for this small group who knew what was going on and had cut this own deal. So the challenge is it hasn't been publicly released yet, because clearly, if everybody knew, then it would start to cause problems, because then people would start paying attention to what blockchain identity meant when you link it to public benefit systems. And I'm trying to get this information out, even as a model, to say, as an educational piece, as a one page. Like, these are being developed. They are linking them to our benefit systems. They are coding in nudges. These things have, like, our systems are racialized. This could go very wrong. We don't think we should have blockchain welfare. And I think now it's not just Allison from her kitchen table. It actually has the backing of a larger organization of the people who would be most likely to be among those to be affected by those systems. So that's my one small bit of progress. I know it's not much, but like from a small group of people to be like, no, this is happening. No, this is happening. So that's it, yeah. Oh, yeah. So if I was circulating around, I don't know where it ended up, the notebook. If anybody wants to get the slides, and also, like, I try to send, like, when I've been, my headspace has been in the prison reform stuff lately, and I have so much to write, and I had to take time out to put these presentations together. But, like, usually once or twice a month I have a blog post, and I do, like, little listservs so I can send it, because if you wait on the algorithms on social media, like, half the time people won't see. So if you'd like to be on that list, just sign the notebook or be in touch with me, and I can send this and my contact information. Because I'm not hopeless. Like, I believe that people have been fighting this stuff for a heck of a long time. And I'm trying to find the people who have those skills, because I have certain skills, but those aren't, the resistance stuff, I've done it in a micro level, but I haven't done it at scale. And I don't think, like I said, 97% of the people in the world would not want a militarized, automated, digital world of racial capitalism. Like, I have to believe it. But we have to understand, and this is the thing that's challenging for me, is a lot of people on the conservative side are sort of like, we're just going to go down to the Founding Fathers and the Constitution and all. And I'm like, no, because it has to be something that addresses those foundational myths, that is not that is the new thing, that acknowledges that history and builds what has to happen next. So that's where my frame is, and we just need to find each other and move forward. So thanks.